James in chapter 1, we can say that he starts by saying, count it all joy when you go through various trials. Now, depending on the version of your Bible, it may say temptation. But in the Greek, the word for trial is periamos, which means putting to proof or test. And so it says, do not worry when you go through various trials, because the trials are proving your faith. And that means that everyone will go through trials. But he goes on to say, let no one say when he is tempted. Now, this word, unfortunately, when translating something into a different language, there are some meanings that are lost. And the English language, unfortunately, is not as rich as other languages are. And so the Bible, you probably have a version that says the same thing, that let no one say when he is tempted, and in the verse that comes before it, that count it all joy when you go through various temptations. Those are two different words, and in the Greek, when James says God does not tempt anyone with evil, the word for tempt is different from the word for trial. The word in Greek is pirados. Pirados, which means to entice. To entice. Now, the difference is in the meaning. One is to try, and the other is to tempt. If we think about it in this way, when we were in school, we did exams. And the teacher giving you an exam, they just wanted to confirm that you know what you have been learning. And so the intention of the exam is to make you pass. Correct? Hello? A temptation, on the other hand, and we'll see what James says, temptations are when we are tempted, which is our lusts. We are drawn away by our lusts. Now, a temptation, on the other hand, is meant, it actually is a trap. It is supposed to make you fail. So the difference between those two is that one intends that you pass, and the other one intends that you fail. And James is saying, count it all joy when you go through various trials, which means it is a part of life as a Christian. Because trials will make your faith strong. But for temptations come because of our lusts. And they are meant to be like a trap to ensnare you. And James is saying, let no one say when you are tempted that I am tempted by God. God tempts no one with evil. Jesus, when he taught his disciples to pray, he told them, lead us not. God does not tempt us, but if we are drawn away by our lust, he will lead us into. A good example is the prophet in the Bible called Balaam. Balaam was told by God, don't go. But when the king brought about some good things, some gifts, Balaam goes back to God and says, are you sure you said don't go? Now what is that? Is that a trial? Or is it a temptation? And when he insisted, now God said, okay, you do what? But God was now leading him to his death. Because he had decided to give in to his lust, he is now going, and he would have been killed if it were not for his donkey. That is the essence of temptation. Temptations are meant to catch you. Jesus said, lead us not into temptation. We must move on. In the chapter 1, he goes on to say, we must be doers. And the theme for this year, by the way, have you noticed that there are open quotation marks, but there is nothing to close it. So I don't know whether it is it means you go on or it is that particular quotation anyway. But the point is this: in the book of James chapter 1, he says, "Be doers of the word and not just." Now the word for doers is translated in Greek. It is translated to mean performer. In other words, perform the word. So to be a doer is to perform the word. In chapter 2, James starts by talking of favoritism. And he says, if two men come to your congregation and one is dressed well, another one is dressed not so well, and then you say to the one who is well dressed, come and sit here, sit up here. And to the one who isn't dressed very well, stand over there or sit here under my footstool. He says, there you have become a judge. You are showing favoritism, and he's warning that when you do that, you are not acting right. And this is the wisdom that James is giving to them. And he goes on to say, if you are keeping the law, because there is a good chance that they are saying, no, you see, we are just keeping the law that says, love your neighbor as yourself. But you see, you are saying, yes, you love your neighbor as yourself, but you are showing favoritism between the two. So one looks like they have better treatment than the other. And so he says that if you keep the law, but you err in one, then you have transgressed the law. And I gave an example of a driver on the road who is driving and keeping all the traffic laws. But when you get to a certain junction, instead of turning and to keep left, then you turn and you go to the right. And when you see a traffic or officer stop you, do you tell them, you see, officer, I have obeyed all the traffic laws. I did not overspeed. I did not jump the traffic lights. It is only here. What do you think the traffic officer will say? You have done what? You have broken the law. It doesn't matter if you are good over there, but here you have broken the law. That is what James is saying. If you are to keep the law, as you say, then keep the whole law. If you keep one and not the other, you are a transgressor of the law. And he says, it does not profit to have faith without works. Now, some people have a big problem with that statement. To say that faith without works is dead. It is like saying that faith has to be followed by works of the law. But no, James is saying that if you have faith, it is deeds. Now, the word for faith, the Greek word for faith is ergon, which means deeds, actions, not works of the law. Like in the case where Paul was talking about it. It is deeds. Because if I am a Christian, I will perform, I will act, I will behave like a Christian. Which means whatever I do comes from who I am. And so if I have faith, it will be demonstrated by how I behave. And he gives an example of someone who is hungry. You cannot tell them, go home, be blessed, be warm, and be fed, if you're not going to provide whatever he needs. Your faith is vain. By the way, it is not in vain. It says your faith is vain. Now the meaning of vain is nothing. It is zero. It is useless. Your faith is useless if it is not demonstrated by actions. Chapter 3 is where James now talks of teachers. And he says, I do not encourage many to be teachers. Why? Because in our words we offend. And if there is anyone who is perfect, it is that one who does not offend in word. That is a perfect person. And I don't know whether a perfect person exists where our words are concerned. And so he says, teachers will have a greater judgment, a higher judgment than others. Why? Because one, they are portraying whatever they are saying, or they are not. I may be preaching and telling you faith without works is dead, but I go out there and I do not act like I am saying. And so I am the kind of scrutiny and judgment on me is higher, because I am claiming to be doing it. I am teaching that you do it, but I am not doing it. And so James says, I do not encourage many to be teachers. He goes on and he goes back to what he said in verse 1 when he talks of the tongue. And he says now that men have been able to tame lions and all wild animals, but they have not been able to tame the tongue. A preacher once went before his congregation and said, I will show you the organ of my body that gives me most temptation. And then he did this. James is saying that the tongue is an unruly evil. Unruly evil. It sets on fire the course of nature, and it is in itself set on the fire of hell. In other words, he's saying we have been able to do many things as human beings, but we have not been able to tame our tongue. I'm rushing because of time. He also comes out with the theme of wisdom. And he says there are two kinds of wisdom. There is wisdom that is from below, and there is wisdom that is from above. In fact, he even says, if any lacks wisdom, let him ask who? Which is from God, who gives freely to all men without reproaching. He's saying, if you lack wisdom, ask the wisdom that is from, because the wisdom from below, he says, is sensual and it is devilish. I saw a video this week of those people in those areas were caught, and one of them was caught, and he was laid down on the ground. And one of the soldiers began to spray him with bullets. You don't need to imagine what happened. Earthly wisdom is sensual. It is not like heavenly wisdom. And he says, if you lack wisdom, ask from God who gives generously. In chapter 4, he asked, why do we have wars and fightings among us? And by the way, he's writing to Christians. It's only that they were not called Christians. Christians, by the way, was a nickname. It was a derogatory word that was started in Antioch. And it was told people who were Christians, they were walking like, it is like being told, you guys look like, you guys look like Uhuru. So, Uhuru ones. It was not a good term. Nowadays we accept to be called Christians. But he's talking to believers. And he's saying, why do you have fightings among you? Because of your lusts, you do not have, so you steal and you kill. You do not have because you do not ask. Or you ask because of your selfishness.